Welcome to part 6 of my Introduction to Filmmaking Techniques video series, which will explore 6 different factors that motivate camera movement. For other videos in the series, like camera angles or composition, make sure to check out the links in the description below. Okay, so as we all know, when you move the camera, it adds a whole new dimension to the visual experience of the story being told. But camera movement, without a purpose, is like a broken pencil. There's just no point. Here are 6 different reasons that might motivate a filmmaker to move or manipulate the camera to get a more dynamic shot.
What's so funny?
Reason number 1, to provide greater context within a scene, which can be done in a few different ways. That could mean using a dolly out or maybe a slow pan with the intent to either reveal something new, to further inform the audience about the details of a location, or maybe even just to establish scale, like this example from Loki, where we only get to experience the full capacity of classic Loki's powers as the field of view expands. Another way to give more context is by altering the audience's perspective or point of view by using different horizontal and/or vertical camera movements. Whether you raise the camera with a crane shot to showcase a different vantage point of the scene, or you use an orbit shot to go from a character's reaction to what they're actually seeing.
What the hell are you doing out here, Fred?
Changing or adjusting what the viewer sees in the frame is an effective way to influence what the audience is experiencing in that moment.
If you're real, you better tell me right now. If you're real, you better tell me right now.
Reason number 2 for why a filmmaker might move the camera is to directly influence or enhance the narrative, which I call narrative-infused movements.
Now I got their attention. You go and win their hearts.
Now, I know that I said that all movements should be motivated by the narrative, but these ones in particular also impact the audience in a more subtle way, like the actual camera movement is telling part of the story itself. Some of the most common ways of doing this is either by using a dolly in or push in to narrow the viewer's attention on something important, by pulling away from a subject to suggest isolation or loneliness, by using a dolly zoom to distort the relationship between the subject and the spatial environment that surrounds them, or by slowly twisting the camera to create an uneasy or disorienting feeling, like David Fincher did for this shot in Panic Room.
Are you like me now? My boy's wicked smart.
Reason number 3, to provide the audience with a more subjective experience, where the camera will replicate having the same point of view and movements that are motivated by a particular character, object, or environmental element.
Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
This could look like a first-person POV shot that lets us experience what the character is experiencing from their own perspective, like how Wes Anderson did for this unique POV walking shot in Fantastic Mr. Fox, but sometimes the audience might also be introduced to the character's state of mind. This is regularly achieved by using handheld camera tricks, such as shakes and blurs, like those used to show Bruce Willis's feeling of panic and confusion as he tried to escape in 12 Monkeys, and are often combined with effects in post-production to enhance the shot as well, which was done for this scene in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas to represent their hallucinations. You can also create a subjective experience that is environmentally motivated, where the movement of the camera is essentially paired with something happening within the environment. This can be as simple as moving the camera along with the motion of the ocean, like in Dunkirk, to shaking the camera at moments of extreme action or contact, like this example from Godzilla vs. Kong. A few outlier examples of these types of shots are when you lock the camera down on a moving object, like a car or a boat, or when you keep the camera fixed on a specific spot on a subject. In both cases, the world now moves around, outside the context of the subject and the camera, which are basically linked to each other and do not move. A unique example of this effect is a shot from the movie Euphoria, where even though it may look like the camera is twisting, it's actually the room that is physically spinning, which causes her to be off balance. This motion is meant to represent her struggle to find stability, which we know she finally achieves when the camera and room both become aligned and level.
And the truth shall set you free.
Alright, so the fourth motivation, and probably the most obvious reason why a filmmaker might move the camera, is to simply follow the action, or in other words, to consistently showcase the most relevant / important element of the story at each moment in time within one shot. And while this is technically also the main motivation for every single camera angle, shot size, and composition in film too, adding camera movement allows the cinematographer and director to control or shift the audience's attention without cutting, which can add a sense of pace and energy and makes the scene more immersive and engaging for the viewer, as they essentially get to participate in the action. Now, in order to successfully follow the action, the camera is typically manipulated for two different purposes: to track something or to redirect the viewer's attention. For tracking, the camera can either physically move through the scene, usually in the same direction and at the same speed along with the subject, like follow shots, leading shots, or trucking shots, or the camera can remain in a fixed position and will instead pivot and tilt in order to keep the subject in the frame at all times. Following the action, however, might also require you to redirect the viewer's attention from one point to another when the subject of interest or most important element in the scene changes. This is most often achieved by using tilts, pans, or even focal pulls, depending on the situation. Having said that, filmmakers will also often use a variety or combination of tracking and redirecting techniques in order to stay with the action. Like this example from Into the Wild that uses a leading shot to track the subject as he walks, and a series of pans to show each of his attempts at hitchhiking. Or like any fight scene from literally any movie that will mostly use tracking techniques to stay with the main subject, but will also regularly use whip pans and a range of other camera movements in order to control or redirect our attention toward every other important action, character, and/or detail during the fight scenes as well. This is why I mostly think of tracking and redirecting as motivations for how and why the camera might move, rather than as actual camera movements themselves. Okay, so at this point, I need to clarify that unlike filming a live event, like sports or a wedding, where you don't know what's going to happen and are therefore trying to literally follow the action as it unfolds, in film, the opposite is true. Because the filmmaker's job is to create the perception that the camera is following the action, when in reality, each camera position and movement is obviously calculated and carefully planned in advance. This is especially true for long continuous shots, which are often highly directed and choreographed, as they are usually a combo or a series of movements that are pre-planned by the filmmaker to hit on all the key elements of the scene, using one shot. In the pool party scene from Straight Outta Compton, the camera was actually passed from one camera operator to another to make the shot flow properly, where each operator contributed to the overall shot with a specialized set of movements designed for their part. The opening car scene for A Quiet Place 2 used a robot camera with specific pre-programmed movements that were timed to coincide with the action of the scene.
One of my favorite parts about what happened today, the camera broke and started to slide forward and perfectly went into a close-up of my wife.
And then there's movies like Birdman in 1917 that are made to appear as though they were filmed in one single continuous shot for the entire movie, when they're actually a series of long shots that are stitched together with invisible cuts.
Good. Let's do one more. I think it was very good.
She's just looking at it. What you looking at, girl? Stay in school.
Now, somewhere in between fully directed and reactive camera movement is another approach or movement technique known as planned reactive shots, which are often filmed handheld to give the viewer a more stylistic, subjective, and intimate experience. Planned reactive shots are therefore meant to give the impression that the filmer is reacting to the events in the scene as they unfold, but are once again still carefully planned.
This is like the Dark Ages all over again.
While movies like The Big Short employ this technique to generate more of a documentary type feel for the movie rather than a scripted one, planned reactive shots are especially popular in found footage movies like Cloverfield or The Blair Witch Project. movies that are almost entirely filmed from a first-person POV perspective, which I talked about earlier in the video. But what makes this an especially interesting and effective method for following the action is the fact that every camera movement is naturally motivated by the changing interests and actions of the character with whom the viewer is sharing the point of view with, whether they are the ones filming the events, like in found footage movies, or it's through their eyes, like a regular POV shot.
You okay, man? You alright?
Yeah,
Either way, planned reactive shots undoubtedly help immerse the viewer within the story in a unique way that other filming techniques may not. Reason number 5, to imply that the camera has maybe become unmotivated for one reason or another. This is when the camera wanders or gets distracted away from the action towards something else that's maybe less significant, which is an effective way to suggest that what was happening on screen is either no longer that important, or to simply lose track of one object and then connect with or reveal something else entirely, like this example from No Time to Die. And finally, reason number 6, which is actually about when or why not to move the camera. And to be honest, it's really just the opposite of everything I've mentioned so far in the video. So basically, don't move the camera if you want to limit what the audience is experiencing, if you want the character's performance to shine through, if you want the camera to be separated from the events of the scene, or if there is nothing moving or happening elsewhere that needs the viewer's attention. Keeping the camera still is a great way to let the contents of the frame speak for itself. For more information about any of the different camera movements I mentioned throughout this video, make sure to check out the link in the description below. If you got something out of this video, make sure to drop a like, and if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, and I'll catch you next time.